Welcome, everybody. I'm glad you are joining us. I'm looking forward to this presentation tonight. We will be hearing from and looking at the work of Michael Chinnici tonight. Michael is a New York-based photographer, author, creative director, and designer, and I would add entrepreneur. His love of photography began with his father's World War II era Argus C3 and working in his basement darkroom. I love that. Michael started his own marketing and ad agency, which he ran for 25 years before switching over to photography. And in 1995, Michael founded Icon Digital, New York's first digital photography studio. Photo Workshop Adventures is a company Michael started in 2010 and continues to run today. They offer small group, photocentric cultural adventures to over 150 destinations in over 50 countries for photographers of all skill levels, as well as non-photographers. And in December of 2021, Michael launched his photo-telling book, Vanishing Cuba. It is a collection of over 300 photographs and stories from Michael's 24 trips to Cuba. That's amazing. The collection depicts the changes Cuba faces as it emerges from more than 60 years of isolation and decay. Michael's trips to Cuba have yielded tens of thousands of photographs, thought-provoking and emotional stories, creating lifelong friendships. Vanishing Cuba is about capturing the soul of Cuba. And Michael is a frequent speaker at events where he discusses his evoking emotion approach to photography, which he's going to tell us more about today. So with that, I'm very happy to introduce you all to Michael Chinnici. Michael?
Hey, thank you all. Happy to be here. This is awesome. Thank you, Janice. Thank you, Peter. Appreciate it. Let me get into a screen share here and get started. So yeah, this is who I am. This is kind of what I do, photography. And yes, there is a new book, Vanishing Cuba, which takes advantage of my 24 trips. So 26 now. I was there in March and May. You'll see a QR code every so often. If you see it and you want to scan it, you can take you right over to the publisher site to buy the book if you're interested. But I'm really here to talk about Cuba, my life as a photographer, photography in general, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to do this in 90 minutes. So yeah, there's a lot to say. I'll try to do it as quickly as I can and stay on pace. Yeah, and you guys have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and LACP will talk about them later on with Peter. We'll do a conversation about those. First thing I want to do is just talk about my life as a photographer. I mean, yeah, it did start, yeah, like at 11 years old with my father's Argus C3 camera, which I unfortunately left on a park bench in high school at Great Adventure Park in New Jersey. So that's the last that camera saw. I saw that camera. But it did as a teenager, and I actually put this together because that was 1969. And I actually put this together. It was kind of interesting because I used my dad's cameras throughout high school. He was a Nikon shooter. In 1982, I started my own advertising agency, and I continued to go on and shoot with various Nikon film cameras. And then in 1996, when digital just came to be for studio, you know, with like Hasselblad and leaf-back digital 10 megapixel back camera, we started a studio with 3 cameras in 1996. And that's actually where the little 3 for the Hasselblad is in 1996. And I fooled around with things like even a Fuji Panorama G716 medium. Oh man, I love that camera. It's so great to use. And then it was in 2004 that I got into the first digital camera. And from there, it was quite a few Nikon digital cameras, kind of staying up with the technology. It was moving very quickly. And then in 2010, started Photo Workshop Adventures. Really got kind of my last Nikon cameras, the really big 800, 810, D4S, which I use for sports photography, and even dipped my toes in with Canon on that wonderful, really, I mean, it really changed everything. The 5D Mark 3 and 4 cameras were unbelievable, especially for video. but I stayed with Nikon, and I wanted to switch over for travel purposes and also not to stick these big cameras in people's faces. And I moved over to mirrorless, over to Fuji, which I use today. And yeah, there'd probably there'd be an XT4 there if it wasn't for COVID. I backed away from that, waiting for the XT5 to come. So this kind of just gives you an idea of how long I've been shooting, and even the kind of technology I've used throughout the years. When I put this together, I was kind of even amazed with it. Anyway, let's go over to Vanishing Cuba. You know, it was 24 trips, and people said to me, you know, Michael, you got to do a book. You got to do a book. And I kind of said to myself, yeah, I'll do a book. When I have 4 free months, I'll do a book. Well, it would have never happened. So if it hadn't been for COVID, there was no way I was going to have the year it took to really invest in doing the Vanishing Cuba book, and then another year on top of that. So one of the things I did, which was kind of cool, pretty interesting, was I decided that I would go back. This was like almost a year after COVID started. I decided I would go back and I would look at all of my images, you know, chronologically from the beginning. And I think it was probably around 100,000 images. I actually went back and looked, and sure enough, all of my original edits were keepers. They were great. And I found a few other gems in there. And my first edit got me down to 3,000 images. And then, wow, it was, I had to get down to originally, I think 228 images, and I settled on 300 images. So it's pretty difficult to put that together. But that's what curating is all about. The book is in 3 editions. There's a silver edition, a deluxe edition, and a reserve edition. And these were done for different reasons, because the deluxe edition is signed and numbered and limited to a 500 quantity. And the reserve edition is really a collector's edition that's limited to just 300, signed and numbered, comes with prints, et cetera, in this beautiful jewel box, et cetera. It's really, really beautiful. But anyway, you know, the books are produced in a similar fashion, printed in 11 colors. They're really beautiful to see. They're printed in Italy, bound in Milan. It's just, there's no expenses spared on these books. But I'm going to take you through photography and talk about the stories and some of the things here of the 24 trips. And again, it's now 26 trips that led to these 348 pages in these 3 editions, and the 300 images and stories that go with it. I'd start off here by just using a couple of quotes about the book. Anthony De Palma, which is, you know, he's a Pulitzer Prize winner, New York Times writer, and he's the author of The Cubans, Ordinary Lives in Extraordinary Times, and The Man Who Invented Fidel. He knows Latin America, and he knows specifically Cuba extremely well. His first impression was, you know, this book, a book may be a misnomer. It's more like a gallery exhibit, a virtuoso one-man show. Stunning images are spectacularly presented. You must be thrilled with how it turned out. The printing is exquisite and does justice to the images. Thank you for sending it, et cetera, et cetera. He really loved the book. And if anybody's going to be a really good judge of Cuba and stuff, Anthony is it. Ranch Jones, who's an artist out of Texas, and he's the creator of The Lingering Revolution, which is in the Forum Gallery in Park Avenue, New York City. Lance is an amazing watercolorist. You look at his watercolors and you think you're looking at a photograph. It's amazing. So and I had a fortunate we met together this last May trip. We happened to be in Cuba at the same time, and it was really great. And you know, Rance writes, like any culture, life in Cuba is made up of layers. There is an obvious outer layer, iconoclastic cars, cigars, and crumbling architecture. But an artist should see what lies beneath those superficial layers. Michael Chinnici has given us a gift by using his masterful imagery to show us the soul, la alma of Cuba. His photographs brilliantly express the warmth and generous spirit of the Cuban people while revealing the heart-wrenching fragility of their existence. Ironically, Vanishing Cuba is a testament to what is most enduring about Cuba, her dignity, beauty, and resilience. And I think that Rance really hit I mean, he just said it perfectly. I felt it, and he really got the book, really, really wonderfully. Scott Olson, who writes for Frames magazine out of Switzerland, he recently reviewed the book and said, every now and then a photo book is completely astounding. The images are technically brilliant and insightfully composed. The subject is engaging, but that doesn't begin to talk about the power or the effect of the collection. Vanishing Cuba is an extraordinary act of rediscovery. It doesn't matter if you've seen one or none or 1,000 pictures of Cuba before. You haven't seen this book, and the fact is you need to see this book. That was really beautifully written. I appreciate Scott really seeing that for the way, I created the book. And again, that's pretty much the way everybody has really talked about it. So let's get into this, and you can give me your opinion later, whether you agree. So over the years, I've watched, Cubans and Cuban Americans cry over my images. I was recently in Cuba, and I saw this happening over and over when I actually showed the book for the first time to many Cubans. And I would hear things like, Michael, you don't understand. We live with this every day. We choose to ignore it. And the fact that you are bringing it to us in such a beautiful way, it creates such emotions, sadness, yet beauty. And so the emotions are actually twofold. And that was kind of really a beautiful thing to experience. They tell me how often I've captured the beauty and the real life hardships in their country. And again, that's what it's supposed to be. Vanishing Cuba is not necessarily about something being here 1 minute and not the next, although there are examples of that, but it's not a book about that. It's really a book about a culture. And as in all developing countries, cultures come and go. And what we have here is a culture that is transitioning, and uniquely because it has really been, I talk about it being in isolation for 60 years, but the truth is Cuba hasn't been completely isolated for 60 years, of course not, but it has been isolated from many things for various reasons. And the last thing I want to say here is that the book is not about politics, it's about art and culture, it's about capturing everyday life, and it's about my journey through Cuba. Let me take a second here and turn the light on. So I'm noticing it's getting darker. Yeah, so let's get into the book. We have, let's see here. So these are two school children in Havana. Look through the school window, capture their picture. What do I see? It's amazing. Peace sign. You'll see various images throughout here. I would say 90% of pictures I photograph of children in Cuba always giving me the peace sign. It's wild. I think it's just done subconsciously. I'm not even sure they know necessarily what they're doing, but it's kind of a beautiful thing to see this. And again, I only really started to pick up on it after probably a dozen trips there and going back and looking at images and saying, wow, it's kind of crazy. So these two young schoolgirls just looking up at me through the classroom window. One of the beautiful things about Cuba is you can photograph the children. And you know what? In developing countries, you find that very often. We're trying to do this in London or New York, and you'd be thrown in jail. So this is called The Children of Cuba. And one of the things about the book that I tried to do, and I never thought about universities being interested in the book, because this took a lot of fact checking to do as well. Here I talk about, the children of Cuba, and I say in the 24 trips to Cuba, children have always been kind to me. Manners and hospitality are ingrained in Cuban culture. Those people who have been to Cuba with me, they know what I'm talking about. These beautiful children always welcome me with smiles, laughter, polite gestures, and a universal peace sign. Education in Cuba is essential. And here I go on to talk about Cuba literacy rate, how it's almost 100%. In 1961, the Cuban Literacy Campaign increased the country's literacy from 76.4 to 96.1 in just 8 months, when this brigade of nearly 1 million volunteers, mostly young women, went out throughout Cuba, volunteering and teaching reading and writing skills. You know, I've got issues with Fidel, and a lot of people have issues with Fidel, but I mean, this is a pretty amazing stat, and it's something you can't ignore. So, and again, if you've been to Cuba, you know how education and how smart Cubans are. So, you know, the book is, again, a storytelling book, but here it is. I take it even a little further to get some fact into it. And this is the way it actually looks in the book when you see English on one side, Spanish on the other side. This image here, it's called a room with a view. And when you look at this, I'll go back to this is my friend Mercedes. She's in my friend Josephine's room. I call it the Semana Santa room. It's been photographed lots of times. And by the way, all of my images in the book are natural light. There's one image that is done with a flash. That's it. Otherwise, it's natural light. There might be a little fill here and there with an LED or something, but for the most part, everything is, I try to use natural light, ambient light. And here we have Mercedes sitting out. She's a ballerina, 20 years as a ballerina. And you have to realize to yourself, when you're in Cuba, you don't get to leave the country. You don't have the luxury of leaving Cuba. You have a Spanish passport along with a Cuban passport. Yes, you do. But the majority of people never get to leave. So if you're a sports figure, boxing, baseball, if you're a ballerina, you get to leave the country. That's the privilege. And she's spent 20 years as a ballerina. She's nearly 40 in this image. And, you know, I say a room with a view. As she gazes out the window, reliving her performances in Beijing, Buenos Aires, Paris, Lima, Cairo, a feeling of happiness fills her heart. Mercy is a veteran ballerina with the Cuban National Ballet, dancing and traveling internationally for over 20 years. I've had the pleasure of photographing her on numerous occasions, including this early morning sunlit-drenched scene in the Semana Santa bedroom of my friend Josephine's home in Havana, and it was photographed in Vedado in 2013. So again, really creating, looking at something here and making something more out of this environmental portrait. This image here, I love this image. I love the colors that are going on. And as soon as I saw the bicycle parked there, I knew what was going on. I knew it was a bicycle that delivered bread. This is in Trinidad. Yeah, if you come with me to Cuba, and you guys, December is a trip, collaborative trip between Photo Workshop Adventures and LACP. It's going to be an amazing trip. I think I'm only taking 8 people on that trip. Anyway, this basket, this bicycle with a basket, she wasn't at the window when I photographed it. When I got there, it was just a bicycle, and I liked the photograph. I took it, but I saw her far away in the distance. And it wasn't until she walked to the door wearing this purple top that I loved. And it was like, wow, this is awesome. I took the picture. And then later I talked with her about what was going on. And it's a family-run bakery where they make bread. Most of the bread comes from the government bakeries, but these guys have their own little business and they augment that with bread. So that's the story. It's called Bread Lady, this image. This is actually called Vanishing Sunset, and this is the Malecon in Havana, 5-mile long seawall. I photographed it lots and lots of times. This is a pretty spectacular evening that I captured. You'll also notice that I go black and white and color. You know, I wasn't about to create a black and white Cuba book, which I could have done, or and separately a color book. And I wasn't also about to create sections in color and black and white. So I definitely interspersed the color with the black and white, looked at it very carefully how I did it, made sure that it flowed and everyone seems to really like it or love it. So it's, I think that was good. But, this image here, early Saturday morning, family and friends, you look at their faces, again, the peace sign. He's not a child, but the peace sign. And just smiling and welcoming and so happy to see you here. Of course, he's got 2 containers of rum, cheap rum between his legs, and it's really early on a Sunday morning. So he's feeling pretty good. But, this is just a great example of Central Havana, or just Cuba in general. And this image here is an image that haunted me from the moment I took it 8 years ago in Cuba. This young girl, and I asked her to sit down, and I captured this image, and her doll was all dirty. She was dirty. She had, torn pants, and I really felt for her. And I usually don't show images that display anything negative or bad about people's hard lives or hardships. But sometimes you have to show people, you have to show the world what exists out there, because we all should feel it. And so I decided to put this picture in the book. But again, it haunted me. Well, I have to tell you, this past May, when I was in Cuba, I went back to this corner where I took this picture, and we showed it to, I don't know, and we probably got to like the 7th person we showed it to, and they identified her, pointed in a direction. We walked a few blocks, did it again, and found out where she was in school at the time. We found out who she is, her name, and decided to go back there after school. And met with her. She actually came and met me. This is great. I have some video of her meeting up and stuff. I have yet to post it on social media. But yeah, her name is Melissa. She's 16 now. So it was 8 years ago. She was 8. And wow, it was just an emotional experience. I'm really happy to say she's doing really great. She looks great. And that was just something I personally needed to do. But these are the things we experience with photography. And I'm fortunate enough where I go back to many places we shoot because of Photo Workshop Adventures, and I'm able to do things like this. This image here, I won't tell you the title until you see the next screen, but I passed this place many times. I think I've probably photographed this building numerous times. One thing about Cuba that you always have is here you can see half the wall is painted white, half of it's yellow, and the next time you see it, it might all be yellow or it might all be white. But on this particular day, the light was so perfect. The shadows were so sharp and hard. I love the green door off to the side. Everything was great. Yeah, I don't take the wires out because the wires are real. They're there. I'm not interested in turning it into a perfect postcard. I love authenticity and real. So, I waited not very long for someone to step into the picture. And again, I was really lucky. I mean, how wonderful to have a man step into the picture with a red hat and a red shirt. And I waited for him to be in the right spot with the right shadow and the right separation of his 2 legs to capture this image. So it worked beautifully. This image is called The Man, the Cross, and the Shadow. And what I wrote here is probably very, very, very much about, my feelings of the people of Cuba and just Cuba in general in the book. And it says, he walks with the sense of sadness and perhaps a heavy heart. 60 plus years of revolution haven't exactly created the opportunities he had hoped for and those he was promised. The cross wasn't even something he could hold on to, a symbol of faith that was restricted by the communist government after the revolution. Shadows are a symbol of passing light, a reminder of each passing day. Yet in Cuba, the glass is never half empty, it's always half full, always keeping the faith for better days ahead. And that's exactly the way the Cuban people have existed all these years, living their life like it's, it's never half empty, it's always half full. I just think, most people can't even, they have a rough week, they have a rough month, a rough year, they want to give up. Not the Cuban people. This is a great example of, a really great example of Cuban hospitality and generosity. When I took this photo here, I was walking along this fence and walking to the left side here, going to photograph something. And these gentlemen were way in the back where that little house is. They saw me and they started to intersect me diagonally to greet me. I didn't know what they had these watermelons, but he whips out a machete and he cuts open a couple of watermelons and steps up and hands them to me. We don't speak the same language. There were no words spoken, just handed me watermelon. And this is, again, such an incredible example of Cuba, why you fall in love with Cuba. In the preface of my book, I talk about my arrival, my first arrival in Cuba, and how nervous I was, how concerned I was about different things. And by day 2, I had fallen in love with the Cuban people and Cuban culture. You can understand why. This is called, Cuban repair shop, because in Cuba, people don't have garages. They're not repairing their car in the driveway or in the garage. That's far and few between in the cities. And so they do it right on the street. And, I loved the color of the car. I loved the background. I loved what was going on. Everything was just really amazing here. And you think to yourself, you have to realize that if this car, which he probably doesn't have the parts, not only is it like 70 years old, but getting the parts, and remember, you have an embargo, but getting parts, being able to pay for them, et cetera, is far and few between, people being able to do that. So, if something happens, something gets broken and repaired, this car could sit there for a month, it could sit there for 6 months, and it's probably a taxi to make a living, So there's so much going on in this from a story, and you don't realize those things. You just see 2 guys on the street fixing a car. This is an example of just some early morning landscape photography. For me, it was kind of special because I photographed this leaving Cienfuegos for Trinidad, and every other trip that I took going from Cienfuegos to Trinidad was never in the early morning. And so this was extremely right after sunrise. And I'd never been at, when we made this turn on this corner and I saw this, I just said, wait, stop. Got to get out and take this picture. And it really, and this is not like digitized or anything like that. I didn't do anything to make it look like a painting. It's a photograph. And it's just, to me, it's powerful in its own way, the beauty of Cuba. A Cuban photographer friend of mine, Pablo in Havana, said to me, he was looking through the book and he said, Michael, he says, what I feel here, I feel like I'm looking at a book with, many photographers have photographed. And he was complimenting me about the different styles of photography I have. They're not one-dimensional. And I like that comment. I never really thought about it that way, but that was really nice to hear from him. And yeah, it's true. I mean, you see in my book, it's not like it's all over the place. It's a lot of different variety. Here are 2 boxes. They're, sparring with one another. The younger boy is actually a national champion, and his father was an Olympian. So he's got some good genes. I really like the cropping of this and how it was, so the sunlight's up above, but we were getting reflection off of the mat up in their faces and stuff. Socialismo, El Socialismo as an image that's, in a market. And here's a good example of literal Vanishing Cuba. Everybody wants to go and photograph this place once they see this image. Well, guess what? About 5 years after I took this image could be no more, because this place was completely renovated and the walls were painted white. And it was beautiful to go into. And as a Cuban, I could see how, wow, now you go in there and it's like, wow, this is such a nice place to go shopping. And as a photographer and a foreigner, you just kind of removed what from a content standpoint actually makes this place Cuban. And so it's unfortunate that you see more and more of these things happening. And again, this is where you see when developing countries convert over, or just go to the Lower East Side of New York and you'll see the same thing. Lower East Side of New York is just disappearing, like Soho gave way and parts of Brooklyn did as well. And that's just development, and more of the world becomes more and more like that, and you lose these things. And here's, I talk about that right here. And another thing that's interesting when I talk about this, I talk about how these state-sponsored markets, the people that are in there working are entrepreneurs or they're farmers themselves, but they're working in state-sponsored markets that have, graffiti about the revolution, patriotic stuff, propaganda, and it's unmistakably Cuba. And like I said, when it disappears, it's gone. But I'd also say that, it's no mistake that you have this stuff happening where food is sold, because food and water is what we need to survive. So that's where you'll see this stuff. You'll see it in food, you'll see it in food places, you'll see it, anything that hospitals, anything that has to do with taking care of people. This image is actually called Life, and it's the same thing here. Gentleman in Trinidad, and you just look at his face, and I love this portrait because it only took me a second to take his picture, but as soon as I put the camera on him, I just saw this sadness that was just, wow. His life's over, it's done, and he just deal with the cards he was dealt with. This here is called Waiting for the Barber. A lot of people love this image, I think, because of the austerity, it's really, you can tell I love to do very wide environmental portraits. To me, they tell a story. And here it is in the book. I'm not only letting the images tell a story, but I'm supporting those images with a story about maybe how I captured it, what exactly unfolded. And in this case here, I was fortunate enough to see a little crack in a window. I pressed open the shutter on a Sunday morning to see these three gentlemen there. They nodded to me that it was okay to take their photo, and I did. And they were waiting for their friend who was coming out to give them a haircut. Haircuts on the day. He's actually done with his haircut, but on a Sunday. And again, haircuts probably it was either free or it was like 25 cents or something like that. It's incredibly cheap to do stuff like that. And here, this is called Taxi Driver. Taxi Driver, I love this. I love these inside of taxis and cabs, because you can get a real sense of who a person is, what football team they like, what religion they are, what kind of sunglasses they have, family pictures, just all kinds of things, stickers and whatnot. You really get a sense of who people are. This is my friend Dale. We become good friends, but when I took this photograph, she's very young. She's like, I don't know, here she's probably like 24 years old in this image. When I took this image, 2019, it was just before COVID. she was a waitress in a restaurant we were eating, and she was up at the bar. I thought she was pretty exotic looking. She is the new generation coming out of Cuba from a standpoint of tattoos and piercings and just funky haircuts and funky clothes. And she spoke English. She had spent some time in Australia modeling, and I thought, wow, okay, it's cool. And I really liked her. And I said, can I take your photograph? And she looked at me and she shook her head like, yeah, sure, why not? But she's working. So what do I got? A minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes with her? I mean, that's about all I'm going to get. So I grabbed my camera, took her, put her inside the kitchen and took this picture. And you would think it's a studio shot, but it's not. It's light coming in through the door, swinging door into the kitchen. Behind her is all kinds of stuff that's just out of focus. There's no retouching of the background or anything here. It's her. The cool thing about this is that this was taken in 2019, posted then. A follower of mine on Instagram saw the post. He had been following me since 2015. Young Italian boy, great, love him. I didn't know any of this until I met them in March. She said to me, guess what? The picture you took of me? Well, I have a big fan who loves that picture. Well, he's actually now my boyfriend. So he saw the picture, contacted her, went to Cuba, and now lives in Cuba with her. And the two lovebirds are doing great. So that's pretty cool. As an example of just, finding nostalgia everywhere. I mean, stuff like this. Where do you find this stuff? Where would you find anything like this but in Cuba? And actually, this TV is a Soviet TV. Tried to Google this, could not find anything. I was going crazy trying to find anything on the name of this TV. The manufacturer, I mean, I knew the name. I could see it once I zoomed in on it, but couldn't find anything on Google. Turns out that it's a Soviet TV made, Soviet Union, obviously. That's how it made its way to Cuba. But it obviously wasn't sold much out of the Eastern Bloc of Europe and Soviet Union. So again, it took a lot of digging and a lot of conversation with Cuban friends who said, yeah, I still have that TV in my house. Pretty cool. Teatro America. Go inside Teatro America, and it is just a blast from the past, a beautifully kept theater. They should shoot films inside it because it's just magnificent. Yeah, America, I'm American, Teatro America, it's great. Took like, I don't know, 10 cars go by, take a picture, play around with the shutter speed, just too much blur, not enough blur. And I settled on this one with a white car going by. I mean, none of my pictures are like, I don't change the sky. I didn't retouch a red shirt on the person, the red and blue shirt on the person's inside the car. That's just the way it is. And but I like it. I like the way the red inside the car picks up the red in the flag. And of course, the position of it, not centered, a little off to the left. I don't mind centered, but it just works in this particular image. This is called Colorblind. You see it more in the color version of this image, but again, the peace signs and just three young boys playing around. They were really playing wild. I just looked at them, lifted my camera. They put their arms around each other, posed for me, took the picture, boom, that's it, done, over with in 10 seconds, whatever it was. And here you see, so, in Cuba, vary the white or black. Well, in the United States, you really can't say black anymore, and you can't say you really, it's kind of like not politically correct to do things. But in Cuba, that's what it is. You're white or you're black. But you have a blend happening across the board, lots of blending over the years. And you see it here in the different colors. And what I love about it is the Cuban people, they don't care. None of it, man. There's no prejudice within the Cuban people that I have seen in any great way. That's why I call it colorblind, because they're blind to this whole thing. Cuban government's a little different. I mean, you definitely see prejudice. There was supposed to be no prejudice. Cuban government, I mean, the revolution was supposed to be everybody's equal. Well, it's not really true. You know, you always got to show a dog. I think I got a couple of dogs in the book. Everybody loves dogs. They'll go, ooh, oh, but you know, a cute dog. It's called watchdog, but he's not a watchdog. He just barks at tourists that go by, and it's kind of cute. This is in Central Havana. It's called Havana Central. And so 1 block over is the Prado. And in either direction, a couple of blocks in either direction, whoops, are 5-star hotels. So I would normally say, in the past, I would say, hey, this is, you know, you think you're in bombed out Beirut. And now I can say you're in bombed out Ukraine, because it looks pretty similar to pictures we see sadly coming from the Ukraine. But nothing's bombed out here. This is just, you know, everything's falling apart. But it's just interesting to have something like this, and then 1 block over is the line between Central Havana and Old Havana, and where numerous 5-star hotels exist. It's just kind of crazy that exists. Makes great for, you know, black and white image. And of course, this was shoot very, very wide. I think 13 millimeter in 35 millimeter format. This is a wonderful vantage point that I love in Vinales. Well, actually, when I was there in May, it's no longer painted green. It's painted like a maroon color, a reddish maroon. Look really nice as red. I love the solar panels on the left-hand side, probably cheap solar panels, Chinese ones. But they probably bring, you know, a little bit of much needed electricity to this little place. What's cool about this, I love all the birds hanging up on a branch over to the right side. But what's cool about this is that the sun is rising over a mountain on the right-hand side. So it's already come over the horizon line. Maybe it's up about 7, 8, 10 minutes over the horizon line by the time it breaks the mountains to the right. So the sky's already had time to turn blue, which is what you see in the upper left-hand corner. So you've got this blue sky, and then you've got this rainbow coming out of this fiery yellow, orange, not so much red in there, but then you've got it changing into violet and then into blues. So it getting that rainbow effect in the atmosphere, which is pretty cool. So again, from the Malecon, I'm in this casa on the Malecon having coffee and going over my shot list very early in the morning. Nobody's out. So just after the crack of dawn, I mean, you could see the sun hitting the buildings. The sun rises to my right. It was just nice and quiet. The sea was still. And I said, you know what? I think I'm gonna take a picture of a car going by. And I was glad it wasn't a vintage American car, because so many of those. And this actually happens to be a Soviet era car. It's not even a Lada, it's a Moskvich, which is worse than a Lada. I love the fact that it was red, because it jumps out of the picture. I don't know whether I've just been really lucky with colors, because there's a few more images that come up like this. And again, it's not like I took lots of, I think I might have taken 3 pictures here before I put the camera down and got back to my work that I was doing, because I needed to leave and shoot for the day. This is a picture of you know, if you were in Argentina, it'd be a gaucho, but they're not called gauchos in Cuba. With these guys, he's got almost no teeth, so he's got this interesting jawline, which is accentuated by the mustache. And these guys are amazing, though. They sing all of these Cuban folk songs, but they make up lyrics as they go. So they, you know, basically take people that they're singing to. We had a private session where we were having lunch at my friend Olga and Jenny's place, and they were singing, and they isolate the young women especially, and do all these romantic things. It's just kind of the way they sing, the stories they tell. It's really kind of fun, and they're awesome. I just liked them so much, I decided to shoot them. So here's a great example of patience. I walked by this restaurant in the Prado. So that photograph I showed you of the like burned out building is just down the block from this. I'd walked by this so many times. Maybe it was like the 12th trip or so to Cuba. I was walking by with my tripod heading down to Malecon. I rarely used a tripod, only for long exposures. And I said to my friend Bill, I said, Bill, man, let's stop and take some pictures. So I slowed down the ND filter, slowed it down, and went to photograph cars going by. And I shot like 12 cars that went by. Towards the end, there was this, I couldn't believe this car coming down. The color, and it wasn't until I looked at it later and I said, oh my God, look, it's like almost perfect. So yeah, this worked out really great from a compositional standpoint. The colors were dead on. It worked really well. Now, I was there again in March and May, and I was walking down, and all of a sudden I'm like, wait, I thought I walked by. What happened to the restaurant? Oh, I must have walked by it already. No, is it further down? No, whatever. I mean, this is my 26th trip to Cuba. You think I would know where it is? And I was kind of a little confused until I turned around and I was like, I saw the printing on the window. And here's a great example of Vanishing Cuba, because during COVID, they decided to take away the sign and fix it up a bit and made it look like everything else in Cuba. So you know what? The owners probably think it looks great. And actually it was done a while ago, because there's even wear happening to where they did the restoration. But they probably turned it into a rental casa. But the fact is that there's a bit of history here that's now gone. And like somebody said to me, it's really wonderful what you're doing in Cuba, because you're documenting different things that are going to go away. And here's a great example of it. This is a Studebaker bullet nose car. You won't find a lot of Studebaker bullet noses, period. I mean, wow, look at that. I mean, everything about it, from the hood ornament to the nose of it, and the name of it, bullet nose. Saw it on the street. It's like, spray painted with a can of spray paint. And I loved it, but I decided I didn't want to photograph it like any typical car shot, from the side, from the front. Got lots of those. So I decided to use the widest lens I had and lean into it. I had a friend hold me back as I leaned in, otherwise I would have fallen on top of it. Got in as much as I could without getting my feet in the shot, and shot it overhead. I like the fact that it doesn't show the whole car. It makes you really be interested to see the rest of the car. It's now mysterious, and it's like, I want to see the rest of this Studebaker bullet nose. Well, I got shots of that too, but they're not in the book. And yeah, I try to do things as authentic as possible. I could have retouched out my feet in the shot, but no, I leaned in to make sure that I wasn't in the shot. Just an example of hard life in Cuba. This image has a great story to go with it. And yeah, life in Cuba is very difficult. And this is a great example of the difficulty with housing. Again, you got to read the story that goes with it. Sometimes this is looking across the Malecon in Havana, and sometimes photographing into the sun, and the glow that it creates, almost like this monotone thing, is kind of cool. Mother and two boys, stopped them, heard their story. Again, the peace sign. You think I was asking these kids to do it, but this is very, very typical. Sit on the stoop, sit on the porch. Everybody is just doing that. lots and lots of pictures in the book about people just sitting. This is called Juxtaposition. And it's kind of an example again of, that building that was kind of destroyed or just, over time, and then the 5-star hotels. But here's a restored Chevrolet coming down, vintage Chevrolet. And then there's this, again, it looks like it's a bombed out car. And if this had been anywhere else, in any developed country, if it was London or New York, this car would have been removed. It wouldn't have sat there for more than a week or two or a month, but it just, would have been removed. But not in Cuba. You can see this has been there a long time. You can just look at the tires and the way the car is sitting there, et cetera. That car has been there a long time and will probably be there for a long time to come. That's just the way it is in Cuba. It makes for some interesting photographs. This woman, I photographed her peeking through, caught my eye. She kind of disappeared, peeked back out again, gave her a smile. She gave me a smile back. I wrote a story about this and just how in Cuba, not everybody knows who anybody is and what they're doing and why is he taking my picture. And there's always a lot of fear and a lot of concern about what's really going on. That's one of the underlying things that happen. There's only 5 communist countries in this world, China, Vietnam, Laos, North Korea, and Cuba. And don't make any mistake about it. Cuba's a communist country and they control a lot of different things. And even though people are happy and they're happy-go-lucky and all kinds of other stuff, they live under a lot of stress and a lot of concern and a lot of control. It's all about control. The wonderful La Guardia restaurant on the top floor of this building. This is the headless woman that leads you up the marble staircase, and this engraving on the wall of Fidel's statement to the world. Yeah, it's pretty cool place. I do 2 spreads. There's 2 spreads in the book about this place. And when I was there in March, I had a great moment sitting down with the owner of La Guardia, having dinner and looking at the book and talking about it. So again, an old kitchen that probably hasn't been touched in 70 years, 60 years. Family on a Sunday morning, coming through, doing some shopping, whatever. Think nothing of it. It wasn't until I actually edited this picture for the book that I looked at the name on the sidecar, La Poderosa. La Poderosa is the name of Che Guevara's motorcycle. Well, it wasn't his motorcycle. It was his friend's motorcycle, the Norton. If you watch the movie, The Motorcycle Diaries, that's the motorcycle they took throughout Latin America that changed Che forever. And shortly after that, he went off to Cuba and the revolution with Fidel. But he was a young doctor at the time. So, it's kind of cool because you say to yourself, wow, what is this person? Is this person a Che fan? The name is painted on the sidecar. So again, bring that to everyone's attention in the storytelling of it. It leaves a lot of mystery to the image. The image I showed you of the little house on the view, on the viewpoint with the kind of rainbow happening in the atmosphere above it. This is the panorama shot behind that little hut of Vinales Valley as the sun came up. And this is actually an iPhone photo. The book has 2 iPhone panoramas, one with an iPhone 6 and one with an iPhone 10. This was shot with the iPhone 10. Yeah, they're the only 2 iPhone pictures. There's another panorama shot that's in the book, shot from the bell tower in Trinidad as the sun is going down over the sea and the mountains. And I show you this because I kind of like it. I think it's kind of cool the way the again, the atmosphere change from, the sun, and then the clouds kind of block off this bluish area. But what's cool, and again, as I took this image, afterwards, is the sun dropped lower. So if you look where the sun is and you look below the sun and you see this tree, as the sun dropped lower, and I actually changed position as well. So this is what I ended up getting when I zoomed in on the tree as the sun was just about ready to drop below the mountain in the background. So I'll go back and forth on this. Again, if you see that I went down a few flights, so the tree now is above the horizon. But you can see what happened to the colors in the atmosphere. As the sun went lower down, you ended up with these rainbow colors. So, and I purposely shot it vertical because I really wanted to get as much impact on this, again, rainbow of colors. And again, there's no, the color on the bottom is green because of the tree, but you've got that bluish cast that comes in the mountains, and then you've got this variety of colors above it.
Hey, Michael, we want to get to some conversations, some questions and opportunities to talk about the workshop. Could look at these all day, but these are wonderful. But do you think you're coming up on a moment where you could kind of wrap at least for this?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that we're close to the end of this. Yeah, because here we just go into images about the book, or you can see actual images from inside the book. And actually, the book is available at the Getty Center. If you want to go see it there, they bought the book as well as University of Cambridge, Stanford, Columbia, Harvard. And that was something I really didn't even think about so much, as like, wow, would universities buy this book? And I guess because it's considered a reference book, it's really kind of cool. So yeah, you can ask me any questions you want.
Okay, thank you so much. That was really wonderful. It was great storytelling, beautiful photos, and really thoroughly enjoyable. So I had a few questions that kind of came up as I was looking at your work. You called it Vanishing Cuba, and I was wondering, were you aware at the time, or at what point were you aware that the photos and the subjects, more importantly, were going to have this historical context? In other words, you didn't start out like, hey, this is going to be Vanishing Cuba, right? It was at some point, was there a transitionary point where you realized like you were kind of documenting something that wasn't going to be there culturally and so forth?
Well, again, like when you think about Vanishing New York is a good example. You think about storefronts going away and being replaced. When you think about the more I travel to developing countries, the more I realize that these countries are going to eventually lose their identity. If you take India as an example, like 40 countries in one, 112 different languages. Actually 12,000 languages if you include dialects. All these things, because of technology is rapidly changing our world. And when I saw the as tourism flourished in Cuba during the Obama years, and I saw these families making really good money for the first time, renting out their casas. And I saw their young children who looked like Cuban kids 3 years earlier, now looking like kids from Miami with Miami haircuts and Miami clothes and skateboards and cheap Chinese phones, I was like, oh my God, this is going to change. Yeah, there's not going to be a Starbucks or a McDonald's there. Maybe never, but you could see the change happening. And so it's not a matter of documenting one way and another way. It's really more about the cultural change that happens. And are the people going to change because of it? Yeah, I mean, I recently I was in Cienfuegos, and there's this great theater called the Luna Theater. It's so Art Deco. And I waited like 20 minutes for an old car to go by, and I couldn't find an old car to go by and take the picture. And that wouldn't have been a problem 8 years ago, only 8 years ago. So, these are the things I saw, and I don't know that I thought that it was, it wasn't like an objective. It came out of that.
Right. Yeah. Well, we were talking as two New Yorkers, the same thing happened in Lower East Side of New York and things like that. And there's a sadness as photographers, we're attracted to that kind of, that essence, that soul that we see in a place. And then when we see it kind of start to vanish, it is hard, but yet sometimes the people who are there are benefiting. So it is.
Yeah, like I think there should be a CBGB's always in the East Village, and I know you're from the East Village, and but unfortunately, it goes by the wayside.
It does. It always changes. So, kind of a related question. Is there an order to the photos in the book? And because it's called Vanishing Cuba, and you did it over 24 visits, what was the order? Was it chronological? I believe you told me, but I can you
no, it wasn't. It's chronological. As a matter of fact, the book is divided up into chapter. I call them chapter breaks, like hope, excellence, fortitude, different things, resilience, different things, soul. But it's not like you go to the soul and every picture is about soul. Or, I wasn't about to do a book that was about all vintage cars and, all children or all kitchens or something like that. So everything's interspersed. And yeah, from a curating standpoint, the first thing was to pick the images you knew were going to be in the book. The second thing was which images worked together side by side. And then the third one was how should the flow of images go? And it's like anything else. You don't want to front load the book with the best images and then the book dies halfway through.
Right. One last quick question, and then I'm going to have you talk about the workshop and your upcoming webinar. But how do you approach your subjects? You mentioned several times, like sometimes you get a nod that it's okay. And I photographed as a travel photographer in foreign countries, and you always have to understand the culture and those little nuances, like when it's okay and when it's not okay. You can't really take a street photography approach, kind of doing what you're doing. There almost requires a relationship between your subject and some trust in order for them to kind of open up and kind of show you their world. So was there just any kind of methodology, or was just your personal approach when working with subjects that you could talk a little about?
Yeah, it's a personal approach. I mean, I've had numerous people say to me, Michael, you have the gift, you have the gift. I'm not sure what that gift means. I just know how to connect with people, be yourself, let them feel that warmth coming through, let them feel that friendliness, try to do things, say things that break that barrier down. Those are the things that seem to work the best, and you don't even need to speak their language. You can do it with just your facial expressions and your hand gestures and things like that.
Yeah, well, it really comes through. It really does.
Sometimes, like with children, I often love to give my camera to children to play with my cameras. And some people say, "You're crazy. Why are you doing that?" And it was really cool to watch kids photograph their friends and then look to see the pictures that they took. But often in the presence of parents and stuff, it lets the guard down. The parents feel, wow, he's giving my kid the camera. And then you start to have this relationship, even though it might only last for a few minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I photographed a lot of overseas during the film days, and the benefit now is you can show, hey, this is what I took, and
Yeah,
there's a certain trust established when they see what you're doing and an appreciation of it
yeah.
that that wasn't possible unless you carried a Polaroid with you. Can you talk a few minutes before we go on to some questions? I have 5 questions that we ask, and then we have some questions from people. Please put your questions in the chat, and I'll ask them for you. But can you talk a little bit about the travel workshop and your upcoming webinar?
Yeah, the travel workshop to Cuba is a special workshop set up specifically for LACP. We have some unique things we're going to be doing on that trip in December. It's the first week of December. And I'm really excited about doing that one. It's not going to be our typical Vanishing Cuba. It's right now, Vanishing Cuba is 11 days. This is a 9-day version of that. And again, like I said, there's a couple of special opportunities in that trip. But yeah, it's really kind of, all my trips are a small group. So yeah, you maybe not getting one-on-one as like a private, but you're getting pretty small quantity, low count leader to instructor to student. And yeah, I mean, we cover Havana, Trinidad, Cienfuegos, Vinales, great neighborhoods, great friends of mine, meeting with, photographing, some hidden gems, things like that.
And you're doing a webinar, the Evoking Emotion. You want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, the webinars, I think in like 3 weeks or 2 weeks. Yeah, I guess 2 weeks. Yeah, I'm talking about what it's like to photograph as a documentary photographer, and the fact that using both the evoking emotion technique and storytelling from a documentary photography standpoint. And again, like I said, you can look at lots of different photos, and there are some photos that really evoke emotion. They stop you in your tracks. They get you to catch your breath and things like that. But also the storytelling aspect behind it. So I'll be talking about those 2 things in more detail. I hinted on that a little bit throughout this presentation, but that presentation is dedicated to that specifically.
Great, thank you. The information is in the chat for if you want to get links to the workshop and the webinar. I got a few questions coming in, but we always do these standard 5 questions here. They're just kind of fun, so you don't have to spend a lot of time thinking or answering them. But what's your favorite book or movie?
Oh, my favorite movie is The Wizard of Oz. It's just an amazing, 1939. I mean, it's just like there's nothing wrong with that movie. It's just crazy. And every time I see it, it's just unbelievable. It's just stood the test of time. I've got a whole bunch right behind that. But yeah, that's a favorite of mine. Yeah. Book, I don't know. That's a tough one. Yeah, I'm not going to say anything like To Kill a Mockingbird or anything that's going to be right there with Wizard of Oz.
Okay.
I don't know how to answer the one about the book.
That's all right. I live in Culver City. There's a lot of Wizard of Oz stuff rooted here. If you ever come in here, there's some history to it.
Yeah.
Some of it a little weird. What's your favorite drink?
Drink, like alcoholic drink? I guess probably
beverage.
Oh, I don't know. Half and half iced tea, half lemonade.
Okay.
Otherwise, it'd be cranberry juice and vodka, a little twist of lime.
All right. What part of the world would you love to visit that you haven't already? This may be easy or hard. I'm not sure.
Vietnam, and I'm going there. I'm running a photo trip, a photo workshop there in November of 23. So next November.
Excellent. Yeah, I always want to go there too.
Yeah, it'll probably be Vietnam and Thailand.
Okay. What profession other than photography would you have enjoyed?
Maybe architecture.
Okay.
Love architecture. Sometimes I think, wow, it would be cool to be an architect.
Comes through in the photos.
Ah, okay.
And lastly, tell us something about you that we wouldn't possibly know, which I'm sure covers a lot of material, but
Oh my God. What that you don't know? I'm an artist, but my mother always said, "Don't be an artist; you'll starve in a loft in Soho."
you were telling me.
I would love to starve in a loft in Soho right now.
Right.
Yeah, also musician, play guitar. First instrument I really took up was a banjo, believe it or not. Played the banjo, then played the guitar. Played in some bands.
Excellent. Love the banjo. Well, I'm going to get to some questions here. We have three. Lexi Cataldo, how much equipment do you carry with you and what lenses do you prefer?
I've been shooting with 2 cameras for the last, I don't know, 15 years or so. I used to shoot with a backup camera. Now I've been shooting with the same exact 2 bodies. Right now it's XT3s. And I find that it works much better shooting with the same exact 2 cameras. No, nothing else changes. I usually shoot with a very wide lens on one. It could be a prime or it could be a prime zoom. And the second lens that I seem to have gone with is, in 35 millimeter would be the traditional 24-70. In the Fuji, it's not 24-70, it's like 24-85. This at 16-55 in ASPC format. So those are kind of always hanging on me. I may have an X100 F or V in my bag, and I probably have a couple of other wider lenses in my bag as well, some extra batteries. And that's pretty much it that I go out with. Once in a while, if I think I want to take a longer lens with me, I will. If I think I'm going to be shooting some portraits, I'll have a 90 or a 110, f.12, 1.4 to get that bokeh.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, that's street photography and travel, because when you're in the studio or you're shooting commercially, that changes too. Because now you've got a camera case with you. You can have every lens you have with you if you want.
Right. Yeah, I know from traveling too, you go out morning in the light, with light gear, maybe, catch the morning light, and there's maybe multiple trips back to your hotel, and the last one maybe.
Yeah, I'll expand on that.
I'll
expand on that quickly and say, I see a lot of photographers come, either they're aspiring photographers, whatever, they have a limited budget or whatever it might be. They come with 1 lens, they come with 2 lenses. They want to know why they can't get a certain shot. And I say to them, listen, try to play golf with 1 club or 2 clubs. Tell me how good you can play golf. You have to realize that there's a reason for each of these different lenses. You can't take them all with you, but yeah.
Yeah, I can go off on rants about lenses in my class. With zooms, we've gotten to the point, it's like we stop, take out the camera, zoom to where we're framing it instead of thinking about the lens that we want to achieve the effect. So I'm glad you said that, because lens choice is, I think, one of the more critical choices we make. So thank you. This next question, and I'm not sure this is true, but this is from Nanatore Freeman, wondering why you haven't learned the language after 26 trips.
What makes you think I don't know the language?
Yeah, I think you mentioned that you use, we can communicate.
Oh yeah,
I think that was a general.
I don't speak Spanish fluently. I actually understand Spanish more than I speak it. I've gotten to know the language pretty well, but I must have a language barrier issue, because that's always been an issue for me. In school, I failed Spanish, I failed Italian. I ended up finally graduating with Latin, of all languages, and I passed with honors in Latin.
I understand. Well, you said, you use you can communicate, and it's really true. It's really true, and it works very well. And Chrissy R., your photographs are quite beautiful. My question is, how do you reconcile possible cultural blind spots as an observer and a photographer entering into a different culture, i.e. not being a Spanish speaker and accessing children of color who are not in a position to consent to sit for a photo? Thank you.
I don't know. It's a feeling. That's all I can say is it's a feeling that you get and you watch yourself. No one's ever, in all the years of shooting and in all the countries in, Southern Asia, Africa, South America, and no one's ever come and said to me that, there was an issue with what I was doing or that I made somebody feel uncomfortable. So clearly I'm able to make people feel comfortable.
Yeah. We have a few more minutes. If you have any more questions. I was going to ask you one and I can't remember. You kind of made yourself accountable, you said, by kind of talking about your next possible project.
Yeah, I kind of put my foot in my mouth with that one. So I've been to India 12 times and I've got several India trips coming up this winter and probably the next one. When I said a Vanishing India book was going to probably be next, I don't, because people have said to me, you did Vanishing Cuba, you have to do Vanishing India. There are people who say that my India work is I don't know, they're saying superior to Cuba, but certainly in the same realm. I think India, what's interesting about India is, again, I kind of refer to India as 40 different countries in one. You can go to Sweden, you get Sweden. You go to Croatia, you get Croatia. You go to UK, you get the UK, even though UK has so much immigration. India is an entirely different world. And for that reason, I think I feel the pressure to capture more of India. But you have to have the appetite to want to do another book. I mean, this was just so consuming. You have to realize I not only did the photography, I did the writing, I did the design, the curating, the editing, the production.
It's an enormous amount of work.
Yeah. I mean, when I say the production, I had production help. Scott helped me do all mechanicals and stuff like that. But still, there's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah. Lexi Cataldo, do you hire fixers on your trips or do you photograph solo?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Do you hire fixers on your trip or do you photograph solo? I guess like tour guides or people who are, that you work with maybe consistently since you've been there, because you at one point you said when you were talking about being out photographing,
yeah.
they picked up on that.
Local guides, part of our team, people on the ground. Like for instance, when we do the Lost Tribes of Gujarat in India, we can literally have a different language every village 10 miles apart from each other. And so you have to then bring in a local guide or translator. Then you have fixers that can find you that exact spot you're looking for because they're locals and they know it. Whether you're on the island of Sardinia, you're in Iceland. I mean, I know many of these places really well, but a local fixer knows it way better than me and helps me find those hidden gems. So yes, in answer to that. Thanks for asking that question, Lexi, who I know through my friend Ira Meyer, a great photographer from Antarctica. And yeah.
Sometimes you can learn about amazing places just from interacting with your subjects too. That's kind of the wonderful things is when you start a kind of relationship, even if it's a 5-minute one, you can sometimes find out about this place up the hill that the other tourists, don't know.
Yeah, it's so much about that.
Yeah. To the previous, there was a previous question, and as a travel photographer myself, I think when you do it for a while, there's a sensitivity that comes with it, or hopefully, that you're kind of not the ugly American. I think Susan Sontag said, travel becomes a way of accumulating photographs, and it wasn't a positive thing that she was stating. It was almost like how we certainly as Americans can go in there and we just kind of put the camera between us and don't really have a relationship with the subjects or place. You were just accumulating images, and that was before iPhones. So the sensitivity that we take into a situation, I know that I will kind of feel when it's right and when it's not right, and you hope that you're correct, and you hope you're not going to cross any boundaries or do any anything that is going to be taken.
Yeah, I mean that's all you can really do.
Right.
The intro to the book is written by Leonore Anthony, who's a great artist activist out of Miami, who you're always supposed to have somebody you don't know write that, and I asked her if she would do that. She did, and when she looked at all the images, she wrote in the book beautifully, "Thank you for seeing us. Thank you, Michael, for seeing us." And I was like, I actually teared up when I read that, because it was like, I don't go and photograph with that. There's not an objective to get to that. It's just it's a byproduct of what I do. So if the result is wonderful photography that really gives you a real or gives you the soul of Cuba, then I didn't do my job. I wasn't hired to do that. It's just, it came from that, which I guess makes it a success.
Right. Well, I think just from looking at the pictures, I can emotionally connect to the places and the subjects. And as when we travel, that is the idea. We want to emotionally connect. We take photos that accomplish that. We look at those photos and we remember how we feel. Right. And that's ultimately the beauty of travel is to kind of reconnect with that feeling in that place when we were there. And so often we lose that because we're just kind of grabbing and shooting a million pictures. And I think your small tours, probably are in a great position to accomplish that.
And I learned from my students as well. I can go and I'll look at their photos, and we were all in the same spot. We were all in the same corner. We were there with the same people. And I'll be like, wow, that's such a great shot. I didn't see it that way. You saw it that way. That's wonderful. That's beautiful. You accomplished something. Not that you accomplished something I didn't accomplish. It didn't matter. I was too busy maybe looking at something else. But the point is that you succeeded at that. And then I'll often, learn from that myself.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it all. I think your trips must be probably wonderful to go on, and hopefully you get a great trip to Cuba on the workshop. I think we've kind of reached the end here. There's no more questions. I thank you so much. That was wonderful. And Janice, I'll turn it over to you for closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Peter. And thank you so much, Michael. And thank you everybody for joining us this evening. Just a quick reminder that Michael does have an upcoming webinar on July 23rd, and his Cuba workshop will be in December. Both of those links are in the chat. So if you're interested, explore, check it out. Thank you so much, everybody, and have a wonderful evening. See you next time.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you, Michael.